When I was presented with the opportunity to build an Omen X Ryzen system, I jumped at it. Despite moving away from a hand-built chassis that took me a couple years to build, and what inside was a pretty fast i7 system. It was a 5820, I'll go into all the specs on that later. So despite it being hand-built and having some rather unique features like the cooling towers being glass-encased transmission coolers from off-road trucks to a thermoelectric cooler to a separate power supply to power the pumps without having to patch into the standard PSU to all of its other little quirks. What convinced me to move to what I have? Is it something that you might want to do? Is it faster? We'll get into all that. And in the meantime, let's see what the machine was. Let's talk about my old chassis. My old chassis was a hand-built system that was more about industrial art than it was about being a PC case, which made maintenance very difficult. It ran well, but when I needed to change something, it was a challenge. And it was a i7 5820 running on an X99 motherboard, 64 gigabytes of DDR2666 memory, and dual 980 Ti's, as well as an NVMe drive from Samsung, 950 series. So it was plenty fast, but it was power hungry, and I didn't like risking my kids cutting their fingers anytime they tried to touch it. Okay, let's talk about what we have in this system. This system is a Ryzen 1700x on a BioStar X370 GT5 motherboard. It's the only micro ATX motherboard I could find that had the X370 chipset and SLI that would fit in this case. It also has 64 gigabytes of memory. It's 3200 rated, but I'm running it at 2400 because of limitations with dual rank DIMMs under the Ryzen architecture. I'm also running the same NVMe drive I was running previously, and the video card is a 1080 Ti from EVGA. It's the SC2 Hybrid, which has a AIO water cooler attached to it. For cooling, I'm running the NZXT Kraken X52, which is a 240 mil rad in this case. And it's fast. In just a second, we'll talk about how much faster it is, in what ways, and power consumption. Is it faster? Yup. It's about 40% faster on the CPU end. That's between a i7 5820 on X99 and the 1700X on X370. Now, that's an average across the board. Cinebench seems to represent pretty well my experiences for speed increase from the CPU end. And previously I was getting 1200, now I'm getting 1600. It's very nice. On the graphics end, games are running 10 to 40% faster, and GL for some reason runs slower on the single card 1080 Ti than it did on the dual 980s or 980 Ti's, but I'm considering that an outlier considering I don't use GL all that frequently. So I'm actually very happy with the results, and I'm happy with the power savings I'm getting from it. Let's take a second to talk about aesthetics. Now, this chassis seems to harken back to high-end workstation designs from the 80s and 90s. Things like the SGI Indy or the Next Cube. Angular, very industrial, but clean designs. Now that really appeals to me because, well, I've collected a few of these, and I've owned several in my history. So that, for the Omen X, really, really appealed to me. And I know it's not all about design, but let's be honest. We like having things that are a pleasure to look at. My overall impressions of this case, compared to other things I've seen on the market recently, is that if size isn't your concern, because that thing's huge, I like it better than anything else that's out there. I think that it can be as understated or as obsequious as you want it to be. Go for red blinky lights if you like, or just a pale blue or a pale white. Make it black. You can buy it from Main Gear in all kinds of different colors. I like it a little bit more laid back, more of a workstation industrial vibe than otherwise. But I think it's very well built and, well thought out case. There are a couple things that I would have done differently. I might have made it a little bit deeper so you could fit a 360 rad in it. You have 3 fan ports. It would have taken another 40 millimeters to get that. The fact that it only uses a micro ATX motherboard, that only fits that despite the size of the case, is a little bit confusing at first. But the multi-chamber design, I like it. And, overall, I'm pretty happy.